Shalom. This is Rabbi Azriel Rosner coming to you from Ramat Beit Shemesh with a video shiur on this week's Parsha, Parashat Chukat. Now, of course, everybody now is very, very preoccupied, concerned, davening, saying Tehillim for our brothers, the three boys who have been kidnapped in Eretz Israel, and they are in our tefillot at all times. This week's Parsha, Chukat, really describes a similar situation, and I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned for now, as there always is from the Parsha. In Perek Chaf Aleph, it discusses a war against the Canaanim. The Canaanim heard that Bnei Yisrael were coming, Vayilachem b'Yisrael, and they fight against Israel, Bnei Yisrael, Vayishb mimenu shevi, and they take a captive. The pasuk continues, Vayidar Yisrael neder laHashem vayomar. Bnei Yisrael take a neder, a vow, and they say, Im naton titenet ha'am hazeh biyadi, if you give this nation up into my hands, v'hacharamti et arehem, and I will make their cities into a cherem. I will give them over to Hashem. Vayishma Hashem b'kol Yisrael, God heard the voice of Bnei Yisrael, vayitein et ha'knani, and he gave the Canaanim over into their hands, and they were successful in defeating the Canaanim and saving the captive, Baruch Hashem. The Gemara discusses in Rosh Hashanah what the very first pasuk, which said Vayishma Knaani. The Canaanim heard, and asks, what exactly did the Canaanim hear? The Gemara answers that right before these psukim, we hear about the death of Aaron HaKohen, going up onto Hor HaHar at the end of his life. So we know that Parashat Chukat discusses that last year, the 40th year of Bnei Yisrael in the Midbar. What is the connection between Aaron's death and the war with the Canaanim? The Gemara says that when Aaron died, the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds that surrounded Bnei Yisrael to protect them, disappeared. And that's because those clouds were in the merit of Aaron HaKohen. So when he died, the clouds disappeared, and the Canaanim attacked. What can we learn from this? Well, the Meshech Chachma, Rav Meir Simcha Cohen Midvinsk, has a beautiful interpretation of this. We know that in the desert, Bnei Yisrael lived a rather miraculous life. They ate the man that fell from the Shemayim. They drank from the Be'er of Miriam, the water, the miraculous water that came to them. They had the clouds surrounding them to protect them. And we know, says the Meshech Chachma, that even the wars in the desert were for the most part miraculous. For example, the obvious one is the war against the Mitzrim, against the Egyptians, with Kriyat Yamsuf. What could be more miraculous than that? But now in Parshat Chukat, they are facing their last year in the desert, and they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael. And in Eretz Yisrael, says the Meshech Chachma, they have to move from a miraculous life to a more natural life, where they will be living and functioning according to normal human processes. And therefore, when the Canaanim hear that the Ananim are gone, they're thinking, nature, normal. Bnei Yisrael are just a plain old nation now, and maybe we can defeat them now. Maybe we can defeat them. Now, says the Meshech Chachma, we have a lot of insight into this war. Bnei Yisrael actually understood this. They understood that they're about to enter Eretz Yisrael in just a few months, and that their lives are going to change to a natural life. But now, says the Meshech Chachma, look at the language of what Bnei Yisrael say in Pasuk Bet. They say, Im naton titein, if you give over, et ha'am hazeh biyadi, if you give over this nation into my hand. Bnei Yisrael understood that from now on, they had to fight. They had to act in a more natural, normal, human kind of way. But they asked Hashem, if you give over this nation into my hand, into our hands, the hands of Bnei Yisrael, we will have to fight. But we understand that Hashem is behind that. Hashem is behind the scenes. So they ask Hashem to give over the Canaanim into their hands. And that's exactly what Hashem was looking for them. Because we know the Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses that Kol Yisrael arevim ze lazeh, that Bnei Yisrael are all responsible for each other. And specifically, says the Gemara, when Bnei Yisrael enter Eretz Yisrael, that level of arevut, of responsibility for each other, becomes even greater. that Bnei Yisrael are even more responsible for one another. And therefore, that's exactly the point here. One of Bnei Yisrael is taken captive in Parashat Chukat. The Rashi says it was a maidservant, it was a person who was of a lower social standing. But it didn't matter to Bnei Yisrael. They said, we're taking responsibility. We are going to fight against the Canaanim. We're not going to, wave it off. And we understand that we have to fight and we have to win this war. But we also understand, said Bnei Yisrael, that Hashem lies behind everything and that Hashem will ultimately give them victory. And that's exactly what Hashem wanted, and that's exactly why they were victorious. And the Meshech Chachma continues that if you look at Pasuk Gimel, the language is great. It says, Vayishma Hashem B'Kol Yisrael. God heard the voice of Bnei Yisrael. He heard what they were saying. He heard their stance of responsibility and selflessness towards each other. And that was exactly what Hashem was looking for. And that's why Hashem enabled them to be victorious. So, of course, the lesson for us today, as we are also facing the tragic events of the past 2 weeks, is exactly that. Selflessness and responsibility. Responsibility of Am Yisrael for each other, that we have to understand that when anyone in Bnei Yisrael is in distress, when any one of our nation brothers is in distress, we should all be in distress and we should all be assuming as much as possible that we are responsible for that. And number two, that we have to understand that being responsible, we have to do something. We can't just say, oh, that's so bad, I feel so bad. And we should be davening, as Bnei Yisrael did as well, but we also should be doing. And especially in our modern Medinat Yisrael, what could be a better example, just like Bnei Yisrael in Parashat Chukat, of understanding that even though Hashem is certainly always behind the scenes, it's our responsibility to do as much as we can to relieve the distress and the problems of other members of Bnei Yisrael. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we should all, like Bnei Yisrael in Parashat Chukat, take on that responsibility, and we should, Be'ezrat Hashem, merit as such the return of Naphtali, of Gilad, and of Ayal to the arms of their mothers as soon as possible. Have a Shabbat Shalom.